Hello everyone, welcome to GS Booster Shot, your daily dose for GS preparations. In our today's lecture, we are going to discuss the past, present and the challenges with respect to Naga peace talks. This topic happens to be extremely important from internal security perspective. So let us see what has provided us the context to discuss this very topic. So recently, Tamil Nadu Governor Shri R.N. Ravi has resigned from the post of the interlocutor for the peace talks with Naga groups. This topic has been covered up in Indian Express's Explained section on Saturday's edition. So, before we understand the issue at hand at present, let us understand the background of Naga insurgency and the peace process. What is this peace process? This peace process refers to the ongoing talks between Government of India and the Naga insurgent groups, particularly Nationalist Socialist Council of Nagaland Isaac Mohivian since 1997 in order to secure a Naga peace accord. So, let us first understand the history of this insurgency with a little background of who Nagas are actually. So, Nagas are chiefly inhabitants of Naga hills in the eastern Himalayas along the Burma border, that is the Myanmar border. So, are these tribes homogeneous? Basically, they gather their homogeneity from being occupants of a similar area. Otherwise, they speak different languages and have allegiance to different tribal leaders. So, if we go back in history, after taking control of Assam in 1826, the British steadily expanded its domain over Naga hills by 1892, and it is this very time when Nagas came under the dominion of the Britishers, that is by 1892. So, with respect to the connect of Nagas with the rest of India, basically Nagas have remained aloof from the geographical, political, cultural, social, religious and business aspect with the entire India during the time of Britishers and before that. Moreover, after gaining control of the Naga hills, unlike other areas, the Britishers did not allow people from lowlands to go to Naga hills. The only people who were allowed to go to Naga hills were Christian missionaries. It is also the very reason why today more than 90% of the population of Nagaland practices Christianism or believes in Christianism. Moreover, with respect to participation of Nagas in Indian freedom struggle, we also find little evidence, and they largely remained aloof from India's freedom struggle as well. So, during the World War I, Nagas participated in this war on behalf of the Britishers in Europe, and when they came back with the ideas of nationalism. This led them to establish the Naga Club in 1918. So, this club basically provided a socio-political foundation for Naga nationalist movement. In 1929, when Simon Commission came to India in order to discuss about further reforms, this club submitted a memorandum to the Simon Commission requesting that should India be given independence at that very time, Nagas should be given the choice of self-determination, that is to decide whether or not they should live with India or form a separate country. In 1945, the Naga Hills District Tribal Council was established as a forum of various Naga groups in the district. Why am I calling this as a district? Because at the time of British rule, Nagaland was actually a district of Assam. So, in February 1946, this Naga Tribal Council was reorganized and given a political nature and called Naga National Council or NNC. So, finally, they formed themselves into a political entity. In this political entity, all the tribes were actually represented, although some tribes did had some sort of upper edge with respect to other tribes. So, at the time that it was decided that now India would be divided British India would be divided into India and Pakistan, Nagas had initially, the NNC basically had initially demanded that they should be given autonomy within the Indian Union along with a separate electorate. However, with the influence and leadership of Agami Zapo Fizo, he has been a very important leader of the Naga movement, they adopted a secessionist outlook. And now onwards, they wanted a sovereign Naga state. And with respect to them, they started the first and most significant insurgency in Nagaland under leadership of Fizo in early 1950s. So why did they choose basically violence? So when we see, wherever we see, when a group wants to form another state and get out from the state, they start with violence. Why is that so? Because the first and foremost task of a state is to provide security to its citizens. And once a state fails in that very thing and people's trust over that very state's capacity to provide them security erodes, and that very point in time the state has to give up this very territory, because then the people would not actually stand with the state. This is true with respect to Pakistan as well. It is when Muhammad Ali Jinnah gave the call for direct action and violence, widespread violence started, only and only then the INC, Indian National Congress, agreed to provide them with a separate state. And this has been true with respect to many other process of state creations as well. And in this very leg, the Nagas also started violence. So from 19 and just a day before independence, India's independence, that is 15th of August, Nagas declared themselves to be an independent nation. NNC declared Nagaland to be an independent nation. From 1952 onwards, violence begins as talks between Nehru and Fizo failed. So Nehru did talk with Agami Zapo Fizo, and upon his demand for a separate state, the talks broke down. In 1956, Fizo creates an underground national Naga federal government and Naga Federal Army and launched an armed rebellion. So basically he has established a separate government and remained underground for quite a while, and from there he started rebellion, an armed rebellion against the Indian state. It was in 1958 that Armed Forces Special Powers Act was enacted for the first time in Naga Hills. So AFSPA was first enacted in 1958 in Naga Hills district. Why was AFSPA actually enacted? This has a special relation with respect to the concept of insurgency. What happens during insurgency? Insurgency is a concept in which people of your own country take up arms against you, and now you have to fight them and subdue them and not some external power. So in this very scenario, what happens is these people are very much integrated into the society, and it becomes difficult to differentiate as to who are actually against you and who are with you. Now what will happen is that people from Naga household will only get attracted to this very thing and join insurgency, and certain times they'll go out and then will come back. So how to get to know as to who are into insurgents and who are not? Even parents who would not actually support their child getting into insurgent group would not actually give their child's name out to the government. And it is for this very reason that extreme powers are given to the police for search and seizure at any point in time, so as to identify as to which people are into this very insurgency and not. This naturally leads to certain sort of human rights violation, because there is an element of doubt present in every operation and with respect to every individual when such operations to identify people are done. And if this continues for a while, a natural hatred, there is a probability, will arise in that very area. Why is that so? Because in this very process there is a possibility that an innocent also gets impacted, and then people's sentiment are also not entirely against the cause, whether or not they are participating in it or not. So that is why AFSPA was enacted over there. Then when did this armed struggle subsides? What happens is that after Fizo had talks between Nehru and Fizo broke down, so the government started negotiating with certain moderate leaders of the NNC, and what happened is they were successful on getting their demand of a Nagaland state fulfilled, and in incorporated Article 371A guaranteed Naga customary laws would be honoured in the Indian Constitution. So, as per Article 371A, if there are certain Naga customary laws which are against the Constitution or in contravention of the Constitution, unlike other scenarios, these laws would prevail. And by 1963, the 16th state of Nagaland in Indian Union was created out of the district of Assam. So, this helped to pacify many leaders, many moderate sections of NNC, and this led subsequent to the subsidence of the armed struggle. So, with this, the secessionist movement declined to a great extent. However, several Naga rebel groups continued the insurgency, but the scale of violence decreased. NNC declined as differences between Fizo and other leaders emerged. Naturally, when two important sections of a group are going to take different roads, there are going to be differences between them. Fizo also left India in December 1956 and started operating from London. So, therefore, he was not having any ground presence over here, which was also one of the very reasons why the insurgency from NNC declined. However, it did not end it completely. Then, the most important accord comes with respect from Shillong Accord. So, this accord took place between Government of India and NNC leadership. What were the chief points to be noted down from this very accord? So, as per this accord, this agreement, the representative of the underground organization would accept without conditions the Constitution of India. They have to now accept the Constitution of India whole and solely. Secondly, it was agreed that they will surrender all the arms with them in the designated places, and then it was agreed that after that the representatives would sit down with the government and would try to formulate issues of discussion for the final settlement of this very issue. So, सबसे पहले आप Indian Constitution को मानिए, that was the government's first demand. Second, you should give up arms, and then we will come to the table and formulate issues for the final discussion over the agreement. So, this process started in 1975, the process to find a lasting solution for the Naga rebels, Naga insurgents demand. Then starts the era of National Socialist Council of Nagaland on 1980s onwards. So, chief leaders of the NNC during the time of Shillong Accord thereafter disagreed with this very accord. So, these were Isaac, who was the vice president, Chishi Suvo, the general secretary, Mohibian. They called it a complete sellout of Naga rights. This Shillong Accord was termed by them as a complete sellout of Naga rights. They formed a National Socialist Council of Nagaland. In 1980, Isaac, Mohibian and Khaplang were basically chief members of this, and they left NNC. Now, they gave the concept of Nagalim. Their motto was to create a sovereign Nagalim. Now, Nagalim kya hai? Nagalim constitutes areas where all the Naga tribes are spread. So, where are Naga tribes actually spread? They are spread in Nagaland, certain areas of Myanmar, then certain areas of Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh and Assam. Although, with respect to area of Nagaland, it is just 16,579 kilometers, although the topography is very complex. However, Nagalim would constitute 1,20,000 square kilometers of an area, and they demanded that this entire area should be included in one nation, a separate Naga nation. Mr. Khapalang was actually part of a Naga tribe from Myanmar, whereas Mohivian is part of a tribe from Manipur section of Naga tribes. So, then again, after they started insurgency, it again wanes after the split between NSCN into IM and K. So basically, Isaac and Mohivian formed another group and Khapalang formed another group. In 1990, Fizo died in London and who was actually a stalwart leader, and this also weakened NSCN and along with that NNC. From 1990s onwards, there were constant efforts by Government of India so as to meet with the NSCN leadership. Two Prime Ministers of India also met with them and finally agreed to a ceasefire agreement after. So this process of discussion started in 1995 and by 1997 a ceasefire agreement was achieved between NSCN IM and not NSCN Khapalang faction. So what is a ceasefire agreement? Ceasefire agreement is basically an agreement in which both the sides agree that they are not going to use arms against one another. So after multiple rounds of talks, it was decided that there would be no counter-insurgency offensive against NSCN-IN by the army and NSCN would not continue attacks against the army. It is for this very reason that after that, all these leaders came out from their underground hideouts and from that time onwards, they roam around freely in Nagaland and actually practice their day-to-day activities. It has been a practice of Government of India as to never to eliminate the chief leaders of any faction. Why is that so? Because if you have to achieve a lasting solution to any problem and you kill the leadership, then it would be a movement without a leader. And movements without a leader are extremely difficult to control, or it is very difficult to lead them to a lasting solution. It is for this very reason also that you will find in Kashmir that the government does not kill the secessionist leaders as well. Leaders of Hariyat and Mr. Gilani just died peacefully recently. So this is the chief reason why the government does not actually go against the leadership in a violent manner. So basically, after this ceasefire agreement was achieved, it was decided that the talks would go on so as to achieve a lasting solution. Relations between the government and NSCN leadership also cooled down. And then started the process of integration. What is this process of integration? So as we know that from 1990s onwards, the LPG reforms started taking place. The NSCN IM has been passing a budget of about 20 to 25 crore rupees every year in order to carry out its activities. And it is also actually in a manner carrying out a parallel government from that time onwards after achieving the ceasefire in Nagaland. Now, this integration process has actually cooled down many sections of NSCN. Why has this integration cooled down and what is this integration? We are over here talking about economic integration. After the ceasefire agreement, many Naga leaders, rebel leaders, started having businesses in various parts of the country. Many leaders opened up many hotels in neighboring states and started earning good money from there on. So, they have actually now developed an economic interest in India. Moreover, many leaders of NSCN today realize that if they actually get a separate state, not only will they have to give up their economic interest in India, again, apart from that, it would be difficult to sustain a society, a fractured society of Nagaland. Basically, there are a number of tribes, and when power comes to all these tribes, it would be difficult so as to see as to which tribes gains chief importance. Moreover, in NSCN also, it is members of certain specific tribes which are in the main leadership positions, and many other tribes are also not represented in the main leadership positions. So that is why the NSCN's leaders had softened their stand after 1997's ceasefire accord. Moving on. So, what is the current scenario? Now, let us see in 2019 onwards what is the current scenario. So, Muhavian today only remains the senior most Naga rebel leader. As I have told you that Fizo had died earlier. Isaac died in 2016 out of ill health, and so did Khaplang in 2018. NSCN-K, which is actually operating chiefly in Myanmar region, has also weakened due to various splits and actions of Myanmar army. You can remember in past there was an attack by NSCN-K in Manipur in which about 18 Indian soldiers were killed. Thereafter, India in collaboration with Myanmar carried out joint operations in Myanmar's hideout of NSCN Khaplang base, and that led to massive casualties on part of NSCN Khaplang. And in this very manner, Myanmar's army has also been conducting certain raids against NSCN Khaplang, which has weakened this faction, although this faction also has some capacity today so as to do any small attacks. NSCM-IM on the other hand is today estimated to have a strong cadre base of about 4,500. They actually recruit their cadres from young people in Nagaland. So, in 2015, it was a framework agreement was reached between the government of India and NSCM-IM in order to achieve a lasting solution for this Naga issue. And although the details of this very agreement were not shared in public. However, there have been recent turn of events in which NSCM-IM has shown distrust towards the government of India and has been saying that they have been cheated with respect to the framework agreement, and Shri Ravi, R.N. Ravi, has also deleted certain points from this framework agreement without consulting with them and is actually trying to misguide the entire process. So, as we today know that in Nagaland, the government today is in coalition with the BJP. So, NSCM-IM has recently released a statement in which they said that Nagaland state, basically this also have a connotation to government of India also, does not and will not represent the national decisions of Naga people. Naga areas in the adjoining states of Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh would be converted into satellite territorial councils and not integrated with Nagaland. This was also understood by the NSCM-IM after the recent spat between R.N. Ravi and over this framework agreement with the government of India. So, basically what NSCM-IM was hoping was that, okay, if today we are not able to get a separate state, we cannot integrate parts of Myanmar, and we are also not getting a sovereign entity from India and looking for a autonomous entity within India's territory. However, they would have wanted that the areas they were demanding, that of Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh and Assam, would be integrated in one whole. However, by Government of India's recent statements, it has become clear to them that there would be set up of only autonomous councils in areas of Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh and Assam, and they would not be included with Nagaland anytime soon. So, this has also provided them with a reason to back out or to give contradictory statements from their earlier stand. Also, in 2017, 6 other Naga armed outfits under the banner of Naga national political groups joined the talks, and now there are about 7 other groups. This has irked Naga Socialist Council. Why has it irked? Basically, it has irked them because as per NSCM, they have been the chief party who has been fighting for Naga national area. However, now these other parties are coming in and going to, there is no actually basis for their participation in this very negotiation, and they do not also represent the chief aspirations of Naga people according to them, and NSCM-IM remains to be the chief representative of Naga people as per Isaac Mohibian faction. In October 2019, another jolt was given to NSCN as 18 members, 18 functionaries of it joined this Naga national political group, slamming the NSCN stand and saying that the NSCN is actually procrastinating. That has also been said by R. N. Ravi, and they asked for an early resolution of this very issue. So, Shri R. N. Ravi also passed certain statements with respect to NSCN, in which he said that NSCN is actually not eager so as to get into an accord and is taking up certain issues which had earlier on only discussed. So now, today what happens to be the chief problematic issues between the government and NSCN IM? So there have been failure of agreement over two chief issues, that is a separate Naga flag and the separate constitution. So basically they were demanding a separate Naga flag and a constitution in order to signify that they have a distinct identity other than the state of India. However, in today's time, when the government of India has actually abolished this separate flag and a constitution that was given to Jammu and Kashmir, it becomes very bleak an option for the government so as to give Naga people or Naga movement this very right. In its latest statement, the NSCN-IM has said that it will not budge from the demand for the flag and the constitution known as Yezubu in their local language. Also, Naga NSCN is also looking for a lasting solution. So, what are the probable reasons as to why there has this all of a sudden dispute started between NSCN and the government of India? So, there are certain internal disputes also which would not come generally at the forefront. Number one is that what would be the status of NSCN IM and its leaders after this sort of an agreement is achieved. So, first of all, government of India, according to them, would not be integrating these areas, other areas that they had demanded, and would be given separate autonomous council status to them. Then there is already a government in Nagaland, and apart from that, it also is to be seen as to whether NSCN IM does have that sort of an influence over Naga people or not, because now there are number of factions in Naga people, and it would be difficult in a democratic setup also to imagine that they would get the entire votes if the separate issue of state is also accepted for them or larger participation is given to them. Then with respect to parallel economy of extortion. So, as I have said earlier, as I have told you earlier, that NSCN is actually running a parallel government in Nagaland area, and a practice of extortion goes on over there, in which businesses have to give separate tax imposed by them. If this situation comes to a resolve, this has to also end. Then, whether or not these rebel leaders and their functionaries would be given administrative posts or not. Apart from that, there is possibility of backlash from sections still wanting complete sovereignty. In 2015, when this framework agreement was signed, then also there was certain backlash from the certain groups of NSCN itself, and this is very natural. In order to sustain any nationalist movement, what has to happen is that people, and especially young cadres, are brainwashed into imagining a larger issue. And what happens when the leadership would go back on that very issue? This actually leads to distrust in many people of the organization or in such a scenario. And there is a probability that if the leadership is not able to control all of them, that then there would be certain backlash, probable backlash. Then with respect to Nagaland, the traditional ownership of land and forest has always been vested with tribes as per Article 371A. Now the question is, although Indian constitution had an asymmetric nature, however, with the dissolution of the constitution and Article 370 with respect to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, Now, there has been a question raised as to whether or not there has been a probable apprehension in NSCN as to what would be the status after achieving this accord of Article 371A, whether these areas would still be part of only and only the tribes. Then, while the Naga rebel outfits have successfully been able to get the center for talks, neighboring states are wary of the impact of the peace talks. So, not just Naga people are having stakes over here. Neighboring states such as Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh and Assam, of which large areas have been claimed by Naga people, are also wary of the result of this very outcome, because they would not want at any scenario so as to lose land of their very state. Apart from that, if Nagalim has to be, Greater Nagalim has to be accepted, as I have already said, that new boundaries would have been redrawn. So, and the final outcome would also impact the trade and commerce of the region altogether. Now, the most important aspect with respect to writing any answer in UPSC is to know the way forward, know the aspects as to how things can move forward. Shri R.N. Ravi had said that October 31st, 2019 was actually kept as the last date of achieving, finalizing an agreement or Naga peace accord. However, with NSCN not budging its way or NSCN not coming to the table, he had said that if it doesn't come to the table, then there would be a Naga peace accord eventually and it would be taken up with other groups. However, it needs to be acknowledged that without NSCN IM, the insurgency would not come to a closure. Then, it is also important to bridge the gap between NNPG and NSCN IM for a crucial stability of the Naga issue, for the final resolution of this very issue. Because if they will be on different pages, then even after a resolution has been achieved, there is a possibility that differences between them over sharing of power may arise in future date. And in that very scenario, it would be futile to have put in so many efforts so as to achieve this accord. Now, some other issues also would require ironing out, such as the Bicameral Assembly with 40 nominated members from various tribes. It has been proposed that a Bicameral Assembly would be organized, set up in Nagaland, and 40 nominated members from various tribes would be there. So, naturally, this was a natural demand, because you can imagine that in a democratic setup, it would be difficult and many tribes would not be assured of their representation. This is to ensure representation of all the tribes. This demand also needs some ironing out. Then, with respect to the absorption of cadres into local forces or Indian paramilitary forces, setting up of autonomous councils in Naga dominated areas of neighboring states. Not just with respect to, even when we are not creating Greater Nagaland, when an autonomous council areas have to be set up in neighboring states such as Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh and Assam, these very states have to lose considerable governing rights over those very areas. So, that very issue also needs to be sought out with the governments of this very areas with talks. Then, lastly, with use of the Naga flag for customary events. Government of India had agreed that Naga flag could be used at customary event, but not at political events or at political institutions. So, what would be these customary events and how would they actually be significant in order to resolve the Naga pride issue? So, this is all with respect to the Naga peace accord and Naga insurgency. Should you have any doubts, feel free to put your doubts in the comment section. Thank you and have a nice day.